Hi guys, it's Mandy from Mandyleeplays, and in this video, I'm going to do the definitive version of my JRPGs for beginners guide. This is a guide for anybody who wants to really get into JRPGs or has somebody who really wants to get into JRPGs. This is the guide for you. Before we get into the video, I want to share the criteria I have for these games that I put on the list. First is accessibility. I want games that are easy to find on whatever modern platform that you want. So this includes any games on the Switch 1, Switch 2, PS5, and or PC. The second criteria is length.
Hey, yo!
These games are the more shorter ones of the bunch in the JRPG genre. I picked shorter ones because a lot of people get intimidated by the really long ones, so I picked games that are around 50 to 60 hours or less. And third, I want these games to be very simple to play. And I don't mean that they're dumbed down or anything, but the mechanics are easy to pick up and put down, and there's not a lot of complexity into it. So with the criteria out of the way, let's get into the games. First one is Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door. I love this game so much, but man, is it easy for anybody to enjoy. The Paper Mario series is an RPG series, same like the Mario and Luigi series, which I also do highly recommend. Those games are awesome. I've heard a lot of people say, I only like platformers, but I like Paper Mario. Yeah, so Paper Mario is a fantastic way to get into the genre, or just a fantastic game in general, and The Thousand-Year Door is just fantastic. It's my favorite in the series actually. And it's also accessible, being available on the Switch as a remake and on the Switch 2 through backwards compatibility. And bonus points for the aesthetics of this game. It is very cartoony and cute, and even though this game is a turn-based RPG, it does address the most common complaint when it comes to turn-based RPGs, and that is the boredom. In most RPGs, you press A to attack and then watch the animation play out. But here, the game does demand your attention. It's one of those few turn-based RPGs that have the input system, so instead of the usual attack and checking your phone as the animation plays out, you, as the player, have to press A right when Mario lands a jump or flick the stick to smash a hammer. And even every battle is played out on a stage to emphasize, you know, you're putting on a show. And there's also a audience watching you, and if they deem it boring, they will throw stuff at you, but if they deem it good, they'll give you nice benefits. And the game does strip a lot of the traditional class systems you might see in other RPGs and replaces it with badges, so each badge does its own thing, and they're not really complicated either. And when you level up, you get the option of picking better health, better flower points, which is like the MP of this game, or more badge points. So you just have those three to choose from. They're not complex, they're just pretty straightforward. And that's why I think it's perfect for beginners or for anyone who wants a simple and fun adventure. Story-wise, it's very simple, I guess. And Paper Mario games always tend to be very funny, so there's a lot of that, but the story doesn't really take itself so seriously, and that's kind of the charm of it. And this whole adventure can run you the length of 40 to 50 hours, so it's not that long of an adventure either. So this game, again, is perfect for newcomers. Next on the list is Chrono Trigger. Chrono Trigger is available only on the PC, but it's still accessible because you don't need a big rig to run the game, and you could grab it easily on Steam. Now, this game is dubbed the greatest JRPG of them all. And while I don't think that myself personally, I still get why a lot of people say that. Chrono Trigger is a masterclass on a game that's zero filler and zero fluff. It gets right to the point, and each part feels like it's leading up to something. Even the side quests feel important in this game. So yeah, Chrono Trigger was truly ahead of its time. Okay. To experience your first go, the game will run you about 25 to 30 hours. But that's not it for the game, because if you want, you can restart with all your high-tech gear and stats to unlock over a dozen wildly different endings. Some are funny, some are tragic, and others you might prefer than the true ending. And the gameplay itself is a very traditional kind of gameplay. Nothing too revolutionary, and the mechanics are pretty straightforward. But there is some variety, especially when it comes to the dual tech system. It's simple. Two characters are near each other, and then they could get together and do a dual massive damage attack. And also, the game doesn't really require you to grind all that much. There might be some times where you want to, you know, get a little bit over leveled, but you should be the right level in whatever area that you are. You don't really need to grind all that much. So Chrono Trigger is quite simply the best JRPG you could start with if you're a beginner, and you could play it on literally a crappy laptop if you wanted to. Alrighty, moving on to my next pick, and that is Atelier Ryza 1. Yes, I'm gonna put an Atelier game because I love Atelier games. And also, this was the first Atelier game that got me into the whole Atelier series, so it means a lot to me, and it's very welcoming to newcomers. Why? Well, I'll tell you why. Now, the full title of this game is Atelier Ryza Ever Darkness and the Secret Hideout, but from here on forth, I'm going to be calling it Ryza 1. And Atelier Ryza 1 is accessible on all the platforms, and a little bonus in there, you could just get the DX version and not the original version. And the DX version is the version with a lot of the DLC from the original one and other goodies. It's basically the definitive version of the Atelier Ryza games. Atelier games are best known for their slice of life feels and just relaxing feels, and that's for a good reason because they're very relaxing and the stories don't take themselves too seriously. But for me, my favorite parts are always the character driven parts. I love Ryza as a protagonist. She is literally the best, and while this game does focus on gameplay and combat, the thing I want to highlight the most is the alchemy. Now, when you first look at it, you might be like, Mandy, this is not really easy going, this is kind of complex, but it really isn't. It might look a little bit daunting in the beginning, but the game does do a good job introducing you to the mechanics and how to do them. That being said though, if you're not a fan of crafting in your games, then this game might not be for you. So I'm just saying it here. You could look at any of the other games on the list. But if you don't mind crafting systems, or you really like them, then this game is for you. And if you're playing Atelier Ryza 1, you're in luck because that game is by far the easiest to understand the alchemy in the whole series. And the gameplay loop will have you hooked from beginning to end. But despite the very in-depth crafting system, the game still respects your time. It's not that long of a game. I just poured in a bunch of hours because I love the alchemy system and I wanted to make every recipe, but you don't really have to do that. I would say if you're just breezing through the game, it might take you 25 to 40 hours long. It's a bit longer because the DX version does introduce new things. So if you want a nice cozy adventure with a lot of awesome characters, a very in-depth crafting alchemy system, and some good combat to boot, Atelier Ryza 1 is such a good game for you. Moving on to the next one, and that is Ys Oath of Felghana. This is for you guys who really don't like turn-based games because this game is not a turn-based game. It's an action JRPG. And this game has you covered with accessibility. It's out on most platforms minus Xbox. You could play the remake version or you could play the original version. So the Ys series is a very long series, but you could play each game as its own isolated game. And the story is really refreshing too because it just happens in the background. But of course you play as the red-headed adventurer Adol Kristen, who travels with his best friend Dogi back to his hometown of Felghana. But instead of a happy reunion, you find the town overrun by monsters. And Dogi's childhood friend is in danger. No confusing gameplay mechanics, all of it is pretty straightforward. It's just run, jump, and slash. And you do get certain upgrades for magic attacks throughout the game. And the game itself takes place in a really small area where you could just walk to different places. There is an option to fast travel, but when the game was made, you had to walk to different places, but it's really short. But most impressively, this game does not overstay its welcome. This game has to be the shortest one on this list, running you about 10 to 15 hours for one playthrough. And if you do another playthrough, it's even faster because you have the New Game Plus stuff. And if you're playing the remake, it's even faster because you can now fast travel. And that aspect, coupled with the fact that it's not that complicated to get into and the mechanics are simple, makes this a very nice beginner-friendly game. Although I do want to note that if you think all the Ys games are like that, no. Ys Oath of Felghana and the earlier ones tend to be really short like that, but the more newer Ys games are a bit longer. Oath of Felghana is not a reflection of the more modern Ys games. Now the next game on the list is Final Fantasy VII Remake. Now Final Fantasy VII is not my favorite Final Fantasy. That would go to Final Fantasy Type 0, but it's still a really good game and it's a lot of people's favorite Final Fantasy. And it's a good beginner's game, especially with the remake. And of course, the Final Fantasy games are not really games in order. You could play whichever one you want unless it has a sequel sequel to it, then you don't really have to play other Final Fantasy games. So you play as Cloud, a very mysterious mercenary with a big giant sword that doesn't have a sheath for some reason. So it boggles my mind how he hasn't stabbed himself. But anyways, so the first part of the game just revolves around the drama between the group of people, how it is to live in the slums of Midgard. There's a lot of things that are set up for future parts, but it's nothing too crazy. And all the bigger stuff happens in part 2 and part 3, if it ever comes out. So while in the original, this whole first segment was about 5 hours long, in the remake, it's its own 30 to 40 hour playthrough. So while I do understand some people would prefer the original, I still think for beginners, the remake is a better option. Because like I said before, it adds a lot of stuff to Midgard, but the story is still pretty isolated, and the gameplay is really, really good. It's a mix between turn-based and action-based gameplay mechanics. It's really cool. Whereas the original was just turn-based, this one takes a more unique approach. And there's also the materia system, which are basically different magic attacks you could put on different characters. It's not too complicated and it's pretty straightforward. As for accessibility, you could get this game on most modern platforms, and you could even get the original on a lot of modern platforms as well. And if you really love that, you could go straight to Rebirth, which is the second part of this 3-part system. Now I know this is a beginner's guide and I don't want to recommend, homework type games, but with this one, I do want to recommend Crisis Core. It's also a very short game and it's very simple too. I highly recommend Final Fantasy VII for beginners out there if you haven't played it already, because this game is legit legendary. And hopefully that gets you interested in the whole Final Fantasy series. Final Fantasy in general is a very welcoming to newcomers JRPG series, and it's very beginner friendly. Now moving on to the next game, and that is Fantasy Life I, The Girl Who Steals Time. This game came out recently, and it's available on the PC, PlayStation 5, Switch 1, and Switch 2. Editing Mandy, and also for the Xbox. So the way I think of Fantasy Life I is like if Animal Crossing was an RPG, with a touch of Breath of the Wild. So yeah, this game has a lot going for it, but where do I start? First, the story. The story is a classic fantasy story, nothing too groundbreaking. It has a lot of time traveling, although it's not very mind-boggling. It's a very straightforward time traveling narrative. Now for the length, this game could be all over the place, and the game could run you 40 to 50 hours or even 60, but it's a long game if you want to do everything. Now this game, by its name, has a unique mechanic, and that is a job system, which is called lives in this game. And you could take on a variety of different lives, like a fisherman, a cook, a mercenary, a knight, artist, etc, etc. So there's a lot of different jobs, and I like how in-depth each job was, and also the jobs themselves are not really that difficult to understand. Most of them fall into 2 categories, the combat-oriented one and the ones that you have to sit at a desk and do. They're all really straightforward. And when you pick a life, you don't have to commit to it. You could change between each life easily, all wrapped into this very cozy kind of feel. And then to add to this feel, you have a town building mechanic, and while I didn't necessarily do a lot with my town, there is options to really make it big and grand. That's why I say this game could be a shorty, but it could be a long one too. And this game welcomes you to play at your own pace. It's not a game that you have to play the story from beginning to end. You could stop, you could do other things, and then you could come back to the story and finish it off when you want to. There's not that big of an urge to power through the game. And there's also a co-op if you want to play with a friend. So yeah, Fantasy Life I still don't know what the I means, and The Girl Who Steals Time is a very beginner friendly game. The combat and different job systems are very easy to understand. The very colorful and cozy vibe of the game also helps. It has a lot of different elements that would take up your time if you wanted to, but it still gives you the room to wrap up the story and have a nice short adventure. So yeah, I highly recommend the game. Now moving on to a classic in the JRPG genre, and that is Dragon Quest III HD 2D Remaster. No, I'm not putting Dragon Quest 1 because I hated that game, and I haven't played Dragon Quest 2. So I'm recommending 3, and it's honestly such a good game too. The Dragon Quest series is one of the granddaddies of the genre. A lot of RPGs and JRPGs share the same DNA, with a lot of its tropes and story plots and gameplay. And why do I recommend Dragon Quest 3? Mainly because I don't like Dragon Quest 1. That game is not good for newcomers. And 3 is actually the prequel to 1 and 2, so you kind of want to play that one first anyways. And the HD 2D remake makes it accessible for all modern consoles, with very pretty HD 2D art, might I add, and also a lot of quality of life features. So basically it's a classic game with modern amenities. So even though it's a classic, this game is not intimidating at all. Dragon Quest III is a JRPG in its truest form. It doesn't really have the modern distractions. The biggest critique for me was the story and why it wasn't fleshed out as much, but seeing the time this game came out, that was kind of normal back then. With that being said, there is a story, even if it's simple. You are the child of the legendary hero Ortega, tasked with defeating the archfiend Baramos, and that's it. You could really just jump into this game. You could choose the gender of the protagonist, male or female, and then you could pick your different party members in the tavern, and you could choose what vocations they have. And they're basically a blank slate character. And it's a very choose your own adventure type of thing. So this game mostly revolves around an addictive gameplay loop and some good gameplay. The gameplay is pretty straightforward from there. It's a turn-based RPG, and this is why I pick it as a good game for beginners. The gameplay is straightforward, the story is straightforward, and everything else is straightforward. There's not really anything you need to know about the universe or world, and the HD 2D remake makes it all very easy because it adds a lot of quality of life changes like fast traveling, markers on your map, and other modern gaming things. And also this game does respect your time. The length of the game could run around 40 to 60 hours. There's also ways where you can speed up the game and the animations, or if you find the game way too hard, there's Dragon Quest as an option. So like the game, this pick is pretty straightforward. The HD 2D remake makes it easier for anybody wanting to get into the series or any JRPG beginners. So those are all the games on my definitive JRPGs for beginners. If I'm missing one, please let me know in the comments down below. And if you're a beginner and found any of these games appealing, please let me know about that too. Because JRPGs are my favorite genre, but not gonna lie, it's pretty intimidating for beginners to really get into it. So hopefully this list will help with that. So with all that being said, I hope you guys have a beautiful, wonderful rest of the day. And as always, play a good game. Peace, peace.